Left my wife with divorce papers on my bed, she noticed 10 days later during her affair confession texts. I'm a 35-year-old man and, for 8 years, I was married to my wife, who is also 35. I left her 5 years ago. We never had kids, her choice, not mine. At the time, I truly believed our relationship was rock solid, but now, looking back, I see the truth. It was only good for her. I've always been the nerdy type, smart, a top student, but never really in the in crowd. My family is very well off thanks to my grandparents' inheritance and some smart investments made by my parents, so I was lucky enough to not have to stress about college or working just to make ends meet. But I loved what I did anyway. It was during my first year of college that I met my wife. She was in my class looking for a tutor, a scholarship student hustling hard. We soon started spending more and more time together, but never on weekends. I wasn't the outgoing type, and she was always off with friends. Eventually, we started dating and, after I graduated, got married. Looking back, though, she started making decisions for both of us pretty quickly. For the first half of our marriage, she worked. But after her company downsized, she got laid off, and became a stay-at-home wife. The thing was, she was rarely actually home. She was always out with friends, going on trips, going out to fancy lunches and dinners. She had a well-off lifestyle and spent my money to maintain it. Our passion faded quickly. What had started off hot turned into just a memory. When I was 29, everything changed. I was in a car crash, a drunk driver totaled my car, and I have no memory of that day. I was in a coma for 2 weeks. Waking up was like being reborn. I had to relearn a lot, but after 4 months of rehab, I went back to work. As soon as I was home, my wife moved me into the spare room, claiming my snoring had kept her awake. That was new, I know it was. That accident gave me a strange clarity. I suddenly saw the truth so clearly. Our marriage had been over for a while, though I desperately tried to revive it. But everything I did to reconnect fell flat. What finally broke me was my 30th birthday. I came home, expecting at least something, and she wasn't even there. She was off at a spa day with her friends. I ate takeout, watched a movie alone, and made a decision. I was done. The next morning, I went to my lawyer to draft divorce papers. From that point on, I only spoke to my wife when absolutely necessary. I began quietly selling off everything with sentimental value, leaving all her things untouched. I bought a new car and kept it hidden nearby. Within a month, all I had were my clothes, a few laptops, and my work projector, just enough to work from the road. I didn't quit my job, I arranged to do it completely remotely. 2 months after my birthday, while my wife was at yet another lunch, I packed my car and left divorce papers and a letter on my bed in the spare room. I closed the door to our house for the last time, wondering how long it would take her to notice. I decided to finally see all the places I couldn't because of her. Road trips across the country, visiting everywhere on my old bucket list. Thanks to our prenup, she had no claim to my assets. In my letter, I explained that I was leaving, gave her the house and car, and promised a monthly sum for 1 year. After that, she'd be on her own. In my own foolishness, I'd forgotten to say why I was leaving. That turned out to be lucky for me. 10 days after I left, she finally texted, asking where I was and if this was all some kind of joke. She called, but I didn't answer. Never answer the phone while driving. She got an automated text, "I'm driving and will call back later." Then came a flood of texts, confusion, questions, begging for me to come back, not knowing why I left. But then one message changed everything. "I'm sorry, it didn't mean anything, I will cut him off." She was having an affair. Something I never suspected. I called her cell. She was at her parents' house. She started yelling, so I hung up. I waited a minute, called again. More yelling, hung up. 2 minutes later, I called again. This time, she stayed calm. I told her she'd listen first, then she could ask questions. I explained exactly why I left. We were like strangers, not even roommates, because at least roommates talk. I couldn't remember the last time we had a real conversation, let alone slept together. It had been before my accident. For a whole month before leaving, I'd pulled away, selling my things, and she hadn't noticed. It took her 10 days to see I was gone. I told her if she'd called on the day I left, I'd have come back. And then I thanked her for admitting the affair, news to me. She tried to apologize, asked me to come back. I asked her why. What would change? Why should I come back? She couldn't answer. So, I simply said goodbye, told her my lawyer would handle everything, and blocked her. The next day, I bought a new phone with a new number and dumped the old one in a motel room. 2 weeks later, my lawyer informed me the divorce papers had been signed. I was finally free. I kept my word, all the documents to transfer the house and car to her had already been signed. The bank sent a fixed payment to our joint account every month for her, for a year. Almost exactly a year after I left, my ex started following me on Instagram. Out of curiosity, I checked her public posts. I still have zero plans to ever talk to her again. She posted pictures with a new boyfriend almost immediately after I left. To her credit, she never badmouthed me publicly. 2 months in, they broke up, and that was the last I saw of her life. My own life? I have a sex life now. Once I put myself out there, it was surprisingly easy to find people for casual sex. but I'm not interested in any committed relationship. Now, for the first time in years, I'm heading back to my hometown. There's a reunion I want to attend. I'll stay a month, maybe 2, and then I'm off to Canada. I don't plan to look up my ex, but I won't purposely avoid her either. If I run into her, so be it, and if I don't, all the better. Update 1. So there I was, sitting in a cafe, about to tuck into my lunch, when suddenly a woman slid into the chair across from me. At first, I just looked up, wondering if she'd mistaken me for someone else. She had this stunned look on her face, like she'd seen a ghost. Then she blurted out, "It's really you?" Now, I probably looked just as confused as I felt. She leaned in, studying my face, and asked, "You don't recognize me, do you?" That's when I really looked at her. She'd changed, her hair was a completely different color and cut, back to wearing glasses, and her makeup was way more understated than I remembered. The last time I'd seen her she was in college, all dramatic eyes and heavy eyeliner. But now, well, honestly, she looked beautiful, in a whole new way. It hit me, this was my ex-wife. The woman I thought I'd probably never see face to face again. She wanted to catch up, and I'll admit, I hesitated for a second but decided to keep it cordial. I told her she could join me for lunch but that I had plans afterward, just to set boundaries. Sitting there, sharing lunch, it all felt weirdly surreal, like the past had curled around to meet the present. I learned a lot in that short time. I know it'd be easy for people to expect anger or some grand revenge, considering everything we've been through. But honestly, I don't want that. Sure, we're not going to be friends, I have no intentions of picking up where we left off, but I don't see the point in making enemies out of someone who's already a part of my history. Yes, I paid for lunch. Yes, we ended things with a hug. I drew a line, though, I didn't share my phone number, but I did add her back on Instagram. That felt like enough of a doorway to whatever kind of peace we could have. Anything more would have crossed a line I'm not willing to cross again. And on a totally different note, something exciting landed in my lap that same week. One of my remote coworkers, someone living in a small South American country, reached out after hearing my story. He invited me to visit, said he'd show me around, road trip style. He's a biker, and though I have no clue how to ride, the plan would be for me to follow him and his girlfriend in a car as we zigzag through his country from end to end. The thought of the food alone is enough to tempt me. Maybe it's exactly the new adventure I need right now. Update 2. I've been back in my hometown for a few weeks now, and unexpectedly, I've crossed paths with my ex-wife several times. None of this was planned. Some mutual friends decided to organize a few get-togethers and, unsurprisingly, we both ended up on the guest list. I know for a fact that the first so-called friend who invited us together was just trying to stir up some drama, but honestly, by then my ex and I had already had lunch together once. There was no drama to give them. Ironically, I think that little lunch of ours signaled to everyone that things between us had cooled off enough for us to coexist at these gatherings. So there we were, cordial, polite, catching up here and there, but I mostly spent my time reconnecting with other friends I hadn't seen in years. Last Saturday, after mingling for a while at one of these gatherings, I found myself out on the balcony with her. The energy was different out there, away from the crowd. Eventually, it led to a more honest conversation. She looked at me and asked if there was still a chance for us. I didn't dodge the question. I told her straight that if our relationship had started out genuine, if it hadn't been tangled up in money from the very beginning, then maybe, just maybe, there would have been a chance for us now. But I will never fully believe that it wasn't about the money, right from the start. That's something she'll never be able to convince me otherwise. So, I told her, no, there isn't a chance for a relationship anymore. I'm only here for a few more weeks, and honestly, the best outcome now is that we part ways as distant Instagram acquaintances, nothing more. We don't need to be friends, but there's no reason to be enemies either. For those who remember the plans I mentioned before, the trip to that small country in South America is still happening. It won't be my next stop, but I'm aiming for later this year. It's actually shaping up to be my first adventure outside the US. There's another digital nomad I know who's shown some interest in joining me. I'll be meeting up with her first. She'll be my passenger princess for a few weeks. If we click, she'll join me for the South American leg of the journey. Update 3. And just like that, I've decided, I'm gone on Sunday. Maybe Monday, if the hangover hits particularly hard. Originally, I planned to stay for another 2 weeks, but boredom crept in, and I found myself itching to leave early. So, I broke the news to my friends, I'd be cutting my visit short. My plan was to slip away today, quietly and uneventfully, but my friends wouldn't hear of it. They insisted on throwing me a going-away party this Saturday. So, I'll stick it out for one more weekend, let them celebrate my departure in style, and then I'm out of here as soon as the last piece of confetti hits the ground. There was, however, a twist. My friends wanted to invite my ex-wife. I know what you're probably thinking, but my one condition was crystal clear. I'd only be okay with it if she brings her boyfriend. There's one reason for that, and it's not what anyone assumes. If her boyfriend is there, she won't be as clingy. I can handle polite chit-chat, that's no problem. What I can't deal with is her trying to wrap herself around my arm again, pulling me aside to the balcony, or making things awkward in front of everyone. I'm banking on her boyfriend's presence to keep things, well, civilized. To sweeten the deal for the guys, I told them they'd been great to me this whole visit, so whatever they want to organize, I'll pick up the tab. Of course, I had to set a spending limit. I refused to bankroll a full-blown Aladdin parade with elephants and monkeys traipsing down the street. Though, honestly, monkeys might spice things up. In the midst of all this, I reached out to the passenger princess. She definitely needs a proper nickname. From now on, she's Princess Peach, or just Peach for short. I filled Peach in on the new timeline, and she's genuinely thrilled. I can't wait to see her on Wednesday. I might just have to blast Peaches by Jack Black on the speakers when I roll up, just to see that look of bewilderment on her face. Coming home again has been a rewarding experience, but the road is calling my name, and this time, I'm answering. Update 4. Saturday morning arrived, and a mutual friend, someone my ex and I both know well, whisked me off to see my ex-wife. To be honest, she tricked me. I had no idea where we were headed. When I finally understood what was happening, I realized how dire things had gotten. My ex-wife was struggling far more than I ever expected. For a long while, she'd been faking it, putting on a show that everything was fine. Truth was, after selling the house, she'd burned through all her money. She never was skilled at managing finances, and without the same steady income she once had, she couldn't keep up her old lifestyle. One by one, her possessions disappeared as she sold them to keep up appearances, especially for my sake. Now, she lives alone in a cramped apartment, piecing things together on minimum wage. She'd kept up a front for so long, just so I wouldn't feel guilty about where life left her after our divorce. We talked, really talked, about everything. She admitted she did all this to protect me from guilt. She'd kept tabs on me on social media, seeing my life play out from a distance, and it started to gnaw at her conscience. All those things she'd done in our marriage, the reason she married me in the first place, made her feel guilty. She didn't want me to pity her, because as she put it, she got what she deserved. Deep down, she knew that if I saw her like this, I wouldn't just walk away, I'd have to do something. A while back, when she tentatively asked if we had another chance, that was her mask slipping. The friend who brought me to her place saw right through it, which is exactly why she orchestrated this visit, to make sure I knew the truth. Now, here's where I know many people would judge me. Despite everything, I helped her. Her motivations for marrying were financial, mine were not. I loved her, plain and simple. That's the sort of man I am, someone who shows up, even when it's complicated. I couldn't do much since it was the day before I was supposed to leave. But there are ways to help without making things worse. I sent emails to HR departments at a couple of companies I've worked with before, places I still have some influence. In the next several days, I'm going to leverage whatever connections I have to get her a decent job in the field she actually studied for. I'm not handing her cash, I know that's a recipe for failure. But I can open the right doors, and I'm determined to do so. She insisted she didn't want my help, but that doesn't matter. She's getting it, whether she likes it or not. My going away party later that evening was actually nice. After our heart-to-heart, my ex's presence felt comfortable, not bitter or tense at all. I've also made a decision, I'll keep in contact with her. Not just with the occasional social media like, but also direct messages and emails. What she did was wrong, but I saw genuine remorse in her. I know we'll never get back to what we once had, but maybe we can be friends, distant friends, but still friends. I left at noon today, setting out on a 6-hour drive that ended, eventually, in a quiet motel with my thoughts and the droning voice of an audiobook. I listened to Killing Floor, the first Jack Reacher story. Funny enough, all those people who said I reminded them of Reacher? They've sparked an obsession in me. That's been my soundtrack for this next chapter. So, here's where I stand. My life is good, my ex-wife is struggling, but I'm helping her get back up. The road calls again. I'll meet Peach on Wednesday, get a few days of work in, and then Peach and I will hit the road Monday. And in case you're curious, the story behind Peach's nickname is innocent. When she called herself Passenger Princess, the only princess I thought of was Princess Peach from Mario. That's it, no innuendo intended. And so, this chapter ends. Safe travels to you all. Update 5. I finally met Peach. I already knew Peach online. She's a digital nomad, just like me, working 100% remote. But unlike me, she doesn't chase new places all year round. She only heads south during the winter because she absolutely hates the cold. 2 years ago, we started collaborating on a big project, and since then, we kept in touch, first as colleagues, then as friends. We mostly became social media friends, texting and sharing as friends do. When I mentioned my upcoming invite to South America, Peach immediately showed interest. Since that trip was still months away, I suggested something a little closer to the present. Why not travel the US together for a couple of months first? She was in. And that brings us to where we are right now. Peach knew everything I'd shared about my ex-wife, even before anyone else did. The only secret left was her nickname, Peach. I had to let her in on that one. When we met in person, I walked up to her, blasting Peaches by Jack Black through my Bluetooth speaker. The moment she recognized the song, she nearly fell over from laughter. No explanation was needed. She was the one who always jokingly called herself a passenger princess, so the connection with her new nickname hit her instantly. It's always a bit of a gamble, meeting someone you know only from the digital world, not knowing if their online vibe is going to hold up in real life. With Peach, what you see online is exactly what you get in person, although she comes with an unexpected bonus. She has the most infectious laugh I've ever heard. Right now, I'm staying at a cozy B&B for a few days while Peach and I finish prepping for our trip. It's funny to think this started with some texts, a mutual disdain for winter, and a collaborative project all that time ago. So that's the update. I met Peach. She's exactly who she is online, and now she knows Peach is my nickname for her, both online and offline. And come Monday, our adventure officially begins. Update 6. I've been traveling with Peach for 2 weeks now. Right before we left, Peach couldn't resist buying a plastic tiara, because, as she reasoned, a princess has to have a tiara, no matter the occasion. When she popped it on her head, I was doubled over in laughter for a solid 5 minutes before I could even start the car. We hadn't even hit the road, and already, this adventure was shaping up to be unforgettable. Traveling can be unpredictable, though. Sometimes you just have to roll with what you get, like the first night when we could only find a single motel room. Twin beds, sure, but still, just one room. No boundaries crossed. Except, well, Peach did sneakily record me snoring. She thought it was hilarious, and I had to admit, hearing myself made me laugh, too. We work for different companies, and our current projects couldn't be less related. But there are some skills, little techniques, that overlap. Let me tell you, this girl is a bona fide genius. Peach showed me a trick that will not only make my work faster but way more efficient. I was genuinely impressed. But then I uncovered a shocking secret about her. She actually likes pineapple on pizza. That's practically at the top of my personal list of culinary felonies. I stared at her in disbelief, questioning everything I thought I knew. Of course, it's not all sunshine and perfect agreement on this trip. We had an argument. Honestly, the details aren't important anymore. While I can be the stubborn mule, opting to drive in silence convinced I'm right, Peach takes a different approach. After about 20 minutes of quiet, she started telling me a story. At first, I only half listened, but as she spun her tale, I realized it was a thinly veiled metaphor for our disagreement. By the end, I saw her viewpoint completely. Once I'd calmed down, I could tell her my side, too. We still disagreed, but we understood and respected each other's perspectives. All of this just cemented one thing for me: I've already made up my mind. I'm traveling with Peach for as long as I possibly can. And, a small update about my ex-wife: she landed a new job that's truly going to change her life. She genuinely deserves this. It's right in the field she studied for, and during the interview, she was upfront about her time as a stay-at-home wife. That honesty meant she had to go through a probationary period, with training in several courses, and her performance would determine if she got a contract. She absolutely nailed it. Now she's got a full-time, high-paying job. I might have helped open a few doors for her, but she's the one who had the courage and drive to actually walk through them. Update 7. 3 weeks into traveling with Peach, and I thought I had everything figured out. Then my phone rang at 2 a.m. in some forgettable motel outside Denver. It was my ex-wife. Crying. I almost didn't answer. We'd been keeping things friendly but distant since she got her new job. But something in my gut told me this wasn't a casual call. Peach stirred in the bed next to mine, mumbling something about the noise. "I'm pregnant," were the first words out of my ex's mouth. The room went dead silent. I sat up, fully awake now, trying to process what I'd just heard. Congratulations? I managed, genuinely confused why she was calling me at 2 a.m. to share this news. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I need to tell you something about the affair I mentioned when you left. The timing. It was right before your accident. Right before we stopped." She trailed off. My blood went cold. I did the math in my head: 5 years since I left, but the accident was 8 months before that. If she was telling me what I think she was telling me, how far along are you? I asked, my voice barely steady. 20 weeks. I just found out it's a boy. 20 weeks. 5 months. Which would put conception right around when I was back home, right around those gatherings where we'd been talking on balconies and hugging goodbye. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, running my hand through my hair. "Are you saying?" "I don't know," she cut me off. "I honestly don't know. The timeline. It could be from that night, you remember, after that party at Mike's place? We both had too much to drink, and you walked me back to my apartment, and I remembered. God help me, I remembered. One stupid, drunk mistake after months of keeping things cordial. We'd both agreed the next morning that it meant nothing, that it was just nostalgia and alcohol. I need a paternity test," I said. "I know. But I'm scared." "What if?" I hung up before she could finish. My hands were shaking. Peach was fully awake now, sitting up in her bed. "Everything okay?" I looked at her, sweet, brilliant Peach with her plastic tiara sitting on the nightstand and her infectious laugh that had become the soundtrack to my days. "How do you tell someone you've been falling for that your ex-wife might be pregnant with your child?" "I need to tell you something," I said. So I did. Everything. The drunken night, the call, the timeline that made everything uncertain. Peach listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable in the dim light from the parking lot outside. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I have to go back. I have to know." She nodded slowly. Okay. Peach, this doesn't change. Stop, she said gently. Let's just figure this out one step at a time. 2 days later, we were driving back toward my hometown instead of continuing west like we'd planned. The mood in the car was different, not hostile, but careful. Like we were both holding our breath. My ex met us at a clinic. Seeing her with a small bump under her shirt made everything feel suddenly, impossibly real. Peach waited in the car while I went in for the test. Results in 48 hours, the technician said cheerfully, as if she hadn't just potentially turned my entire life upside down. That night, in another anonymous motel, Peach and I barely spoke. She was working on her laptop, and I was staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd gone from feeling free for the first time in years to potentially being tied to my ex-wife forever through a child I wasn't sure was mine. You know, Peach said quietly, not looking up from her screen, whatever happens, you're going to be okay. How can you be so sure? She finally looked at me. Because I've watched you handle everything else. Your divorce, your accident, starting over completely. You figure things out. And us? She closed her laptop and was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Ask me again after we get the results, she whispered. The next morning brought another curveball. My phone had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail that made my stomach drop. This is Detective Morrison with the County Sheriff's Office. We need to speak with you regarding your ex-wife. Please call back immediately. Turns out, her new boyfriend, the one she'd supposedly been dating when she got pregnant, had been arrested for domestic violence against his previous girlfriend. When they searched his place, they found evidence suggesting he'd been tracking my ex's movements, including photos of her taken without her knowledge. The pregnancy suddenly took on a darker context. Had she been lying about the timeline to protect herself? Or was she genuinely confused about paternity because she'd been with both of us around the same time? Peach and I drove straight to the police station, where I learned that my ex had been granted an emergency restraining order. She was scared, alone, and pregnant, possibly with my child. I can't just leave her like this, I told Peach as we sat in the parking lot afterward. She nodded, but I could see something breaking behind her eyes. I know, she said simply. The results came back the next day. I am the father. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my freedom, about my future with Peach, all of it changed with one phone call from a lab technician who delivered life-altering news like she was reading the weather. I sat in that motel parking lot, holding my phone, watching Peach through the window as she packed her things. She'd already booked a flight home. I'm not running away from you, she said when I finally went back inside. But you need to figure out what kind of father you want to be, and you can't do that with me here complicating things. Peach, I care about you. More than I should. But that little boy is going to need his dad, and his dad needs to have his head on straight. She kissed me goodbye at the airport. Not a romantic kiss, but not just friendly either. Something in between, full of possibility and regret. Find me when you've figured it all out, she said. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the biggest decision of my life. What kind of man, and what kind of father, did I want to be? The road was still calling, but now it was leading somewhere I'd never planned to go. Update 8. 6 weeks since Peach left, and I'm living in a furnished apartment 10 minutes from my ex-wife's place. Not exactly where I saw my life heading when I was cruising highways with a plastic tiara wearing passenger princess, but here we are. My ex, I guess I should start calling her Sarah again, is now 7 months along, and the pregnancy hasn't been easy. Between the stress from her psycho ex-boyfriend's stalking situation and the morning sickness that apparently lasts all day, she's been a wreck. The restraining order is holding, but the guy violated it twice before finally getting locked up for 6 months. Small mercies. Sarah and I have been doing this weird dance around each other. We're not back together, I've made that crystal clear, but we're not exactly strangers either. We're having a kid together, which means we need to figure out how to be something. Co-parents? Friends? I honestly don't know. Last Tuesday, she had a scare. I was working in a coffee shop when she called, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Something about bleeding and the doctor wanting to see her immediately. I dropped everything and drove her to the hospital, holding her hand in the waiting room while she squeezed the life out of my fingers. Turns out it was nothing serious, just one of those pregnancy things that sounds terrifying but happens all the time. But sitting there, watching her face crumple with relief when the doctor said the baby was fine, something shifted in me. This wasn't just about obligation anymore. I was genuinely scared too. That's when things got complicated in a way I didn't expect. Thank you, she whispered as we sat in the parking lot afterward, both too emotionally drained to drive yet. For being here. For caring. Of course I care. It's my kid too. She looked at me with these eyes full of something I couldn't quite read. Is it crazy that I miss this? Us, I mean. Not the marriage, God, no. But this version of us. The one where you actually show up. I should have deflected, should have kept things clinical and co-parental. Instead, I found myself really looking at her for the first time in years. She wasn't the woman who had taken me for granted and spent my money. She wasn't the woman who had lied about an affair. She was just scared. And pregnant. And alone. I miss the version of you that exists now too, I said, immediately regretting the honesty. That night, she texted me at 11 p.m. Can't sleep. Baby's doing gymnastics. Want to feel him kick? I drove over. Told myself it was about the baby, nothing else. But when she placed my hand on her stomach and I felt that first strong kick against my palm, the moment became about something much bigger than either of us. He's strong, I said. Gets it from his dad. We were sitting on her couch, my hand still on her belly, when she said, I've been thinking about names. Oh yeah? What about James? After your grandfather? My grandfather had been my hero growing up. The fact that she remembered, that she thought to honor him, caught me completely off guard. Sarah. I know we're not getting back together, she said quickly. I know I screwed up too badly for that. But I want him to know he comes from good people. On both sides. I stayed until almost 2 a.m., talking about everything except what was obviously happening between us. When I finally left, we hugged goodbye, and it lasted about 10 seconds longer than it should have. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Peach. First one since she left. Saw your ex's Instagram story. You two looked cozy at that doctor's appointment. Hope you're both okay. My blood went cold. I checked Sarah's Instagram and sure enough, she'd posted a photo from the hospital, both of us in the waiting room, my arm around her shoulders. I looked like a devoted boyfriend, not a reluctant co-parent. I called Peach immediately. Straight to voicemail. Then I called Sarah. Why did you post that picture? What picture? But I could hear the guilt in her voice. The one from the hospital. You know exactly what picture. I was scared and emotional. I wanted people to know the baby has a dad who cares. Sarah, that's not what this looks like, and you know it. Silence. Then, quietly, would it be so terrible if it was what it looked like? I hung up. But here's the thing that's been eating at me for days. Part of me didn't hate the idea as much as I should have. Part of me liked the way it felt to be the guy showing up, to be needed, to be building something instead of always running from it. Yesterday, Sarah went into false labor. Another hospital trip, another few hours of genuine terror before we learned everything was fine. And when the nurse assumed I was her husband and I didn't correct her, when Sarah squeezed my hand and looked at me like I was her anchor in the storm, I realized I'm in much deeper trouble than I thought. Because somewhere between the paternity test and the baby kicks and the 2 a.m. conversations, I started falling for this version of Sarah. The honest one. The vulnerable one. The one who seems to actually see me as more than a wallet with legs. I know it's probably just proximity and pregnancy hormones and the weirdness of creating life together. I know that the old Sarah, the one who married me for money and cheated and ignored me for years, is probably still in there somewhere. But when she looks at me now, when she thanks me for staying, when she talks about our son like he's already the center of both our worlds, it's hard to remember why I left in the first place. And that scares the hell out of me. 2 months until James arrives. 2 months to figure out if I'm rebuilding my life or just repeating my old mistakes with better lighting.